Welcome to Feminine Power Time, where wisdom, leadership, and well-being meet. And welcome to episode 4 of 9 in this special season 8.5, the season of light. I'm Jennifer Alexandar, co-curator and guest host for this season, which is running in June, July, and August. But whenever you're listening, trust that you're receiving this in the perfect season for you. If you were with us through the first 3 episodes, welcome back, and thank you so much for tuning in. And if you're listening for the first time today, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. This season of light is a real-time experiment in the feminine practices of co-creation and grafting that Christine and I are playing with, as a way to hold space here for all of us to gather and conversate around the inquiries that will support us in staying light, while also creating a spacer for Christine to lean into the women's leadership work that she's being called to focus on right now. It's really a living example of preserving in the now while creating the next, and we're so glad that you're in it with us. If you're new here, or if you're returning, just a reminder here of what is staying light. It means to stay centered, calm, and clear, to be radiant, resilient, and rooted, even in the midst of the swirl of the outside world. It is not about spiritual bypassing, but instead, it's a way of living and utilizing our practices in order to come back to our light, even when we get wobbly. And look, we all get wobbly. We're human beings and we're having a human experience. It's definitely not about being perfect or maintaining some high level of vibrational consciousness all the time, but it's about being human, having emotions, having thoughts, and seeing them in order to transform them and elevate from wherever we are, so that we can show up differently as leaders in our own lives, in how we use our voices, our choices, and our presence in responding to life as it unfolds. So every year around July 4th, which is Independence Day in the US, Christine focuses on the theme of liberation. So today we're going to be exploring the concepts of sacred rage and holy grief. Christine will be sharing some deep wisdom around how to identify anger and grief inside of your being and how to liberate yourself from the shackles of these unprocessed emotions. Because in our culture, we're not taught how to grieve and we're not taught how to discharge anger. So it can get buried deep inside of us and cause things like disease, or it comes out sideways and hurts the people we love. Well, the good news for today is that there is another way. Y'all, this episode is like the antidote to spiritual bypassing. We're going to receive permission to feel our anger, our rage, our sadness, and our grief. And we'll learn tools and practices to discharge it in ways that are healthy, productive, and non-harming to others and ourselves, so that we can use these feelings of "this is not okay" anger to create real change in the world, and to utilize the experience of grief as an opportunity to excavate our hearts and process the sadness and the loss so that we don't have to keep carrying it around with us and recreating it in the present. How does that sound? Liberating? Yeah. We'll also be conversating on how to respond when someone else is coming at you with their anger and rage. So if you think back to a time when you've been in that type of situation, you might remember how easy it is or how tempting it is to react and meet fire with fire. And then all of a sudden, we're all burning the world down. Okay, so there's a better way. And I'll let Christine share that with you here in a bit. But just imagine for a moment a world in which you have the tools and practices to both discharge your own anger and meet someone else's distorted anger with your powerful presence and stillness, to ground it, to elevate out of it, or simply to recognize that you have the power to walk away from it. Talk about liberation. This one goes deep. And when we come out the other side, we will feel the freedom. We will feel lighter. We'll recharge our radiance together. Here's Christine.
Welcome to Feminine Power Time. This is Christine Arylo, your host, and today I welcome you to episode number 167, Sacred Rage, Holy Grief. What do we do with the anger, the sadness that normally is just part of life, but in today's times is so exacerbated even more? How do we move through it, release it without it coming out sideways? What do we do when someone else's rage and grief is coming out sideways on us? And how do we use the energy of rage and grief to actually create transformation both in ourselves and healing in ourselves and in the world? Like, what do you do when someone really pisses you off or something that's happening in the world really pisses you off in a way in which you're actually not adding to the destruction in a negative, harming way, but actually using your power and your presence to shift to a higher vibration that's rooted in wholeness instead of coming from the wound. I have been waiting to do this podcast with you all for quite some time. It's been weeks that I've been chewing on it, and I know I've been dropping it in every so often as I've been doing the last two series. And I had to wait till it was ready and it was right for us to do this. And today is the day. And wherever you are at today, I'm going to invite you to go ahead and press pause on the outside world. And we're going to dive into the realm of our heart today and the power of our heart, but also the power of those raw emotions that can run us rampant, and or we can learn how to move them and move through them and really be powerful presences of change in our own life, in our relationships, and in this world. How does that sound? I poured water today in my peace mug. Well, it's not really a mug. It's a bamboo like water holder thing, and it says peace on it, and it has a big hand on it. And I drink my water from this now these days because it reminds me to slow down. So go ahead and take a breath. And maybe just even a moment of silence here with yourself. Called take a breath, take a beat. Very simple practice for making sure that when the energy of rage or anger or deep sadness shows up, you take a breath and take a beat before you respond. Look at that. I already gave you a practice. I'm going to give you more, I promise. So here's how this is going to roll today. I'm going to first share with you what sacred rage and holy grief is and why did I put those words in front of rage and holy. What is the challenge that we face and what's going on here that it feels like it's important to illuminate, to put our wisdom eyes on and see what's really going on around this. And then 3, I'm going to share some practices with you and ways for you to discharge this anger or grief and ways to move through it, both preventatively and also in the moment. Okay, so sacred rage, holy grief. What does sacred rage mean? So here's the great thing about this word sacred. I love the word sacred. It's one of my favorite words in the human vocabulary. And the word sacred at the root of it means wholeness. At kind of a base level, it means devoted or dedicated to. And it also means to do something without violence, to do something from that place of respect. So if you put that all together, what sacred really means is devoted to wholeness without violence and with respect. And if you put that with the word rage, what that would mean is having the emotion of anger and this isn't okay, and that fiery whoosh that comes out when a boundary has been crossed or something enrages us, and it just like fires us up in a way that is like, this is not okay. To do that in a way that is devoted to wholeness without violence and with respect. Just think about that for a moment. There's a big difference between unleashing your anger, our anger, or anyone unleashing their anger on somebody, or erupting like a volcano with just lava that just kills everything, or projecting their anger and their own feelings onto other stuff, which all comes from the wound and creates destruction and damage, versus rage or anger or frustration that's expressed in a way that has respect without dampening down or stuffing down or passively aggressively coming in the side way. And so think about this for your own life. Are you a person who dampens it down, stuffs it down, passively aggressively kind of spurts it out there? These are all distortions of rage and anger. Or are you more of the person who unleashes your anger or erupts or projects or slashes and runs? We all have distortions of rage and anger. We've all done it. No one here is perfect, and it's not about being perfect. It's about today really understanding when is what you're doing, or even what someone else is coming at you with, when is that rage or that anger actually coming from the wound and it's harming and destroying in a way that isn't connected to wholeness and bringing us closer to wholeness? And when do you know when you're actually really angry about something, but you're coming from the wholeness? How does that feel differently in your body? And you may or you may not know that in this moment. That's okay. We're going to explore it. But that right now, what you're chewing on and what I'm inviting us to, is I put sacred rage in the center here, is like, oh, so like it's okay, you all, for us to get angry. It is okay for us to be mad. It is okay for us to be enraged about something that's happening. What isn't okay is unleashing, erupting, projecting our anger and frustration on another person directly, like a laser, like a knife, like a sword, and or just adding to the fuel. This happens all the time on social media, especially on Facebook, or that what's that app, Nextdoor. I had to like get off of Nextdoor because I'm like, this is not a friendly Mr. Rogers neighborhood. I don't know what's going on over here, but there's so much distorted anger and frustration coming out sideways. But I say when we don't know how to, as an individual, in a society, in our relationship, express our rage, our anger, our frustration in a way that is respectful but allows us to have our full experience, it comes out sideways. So you ever have that experience, right? Where like it's like you're really mad about something and you've been stuffing it down, stuffing it down, stuffing it down, avoiding it, trying to spiritually bypass it. And all of a sudden, like someone says something to you, and you just make some offhanded remark. Noah calls it a drive-by. So did you just do a drive-by to me? He's like, and I'm like, oh yeah, I just did, right? Where I say something kind of sharp and jabbing and stabbing, and not respectful, and because it's connected to that deeper anger, and it will come out sideways. It always comes out sideways. Or it can feel like that side swipe that I just, I guess just side swiped Noah when I walked past him and unleashed my anger. And then it also can manifest in sickness. It messes us up in our minds, makes us mentally foggy and neurotic and full of anxiety. It makes us distress in our heart and just deeper and deeper feelings where it's almost like if you put holy grief on one side and sacred rage on the other. Rage is fire and grief is water. And so when we keep dampening and or just letting it run amok, it will the water will pull us under and we'll go into depression and to despair. And we'll just get stuck in the muck and just pull us down. If we are too over in the fireside and we're just spouting off our anger and adding fuel to the fire, which happens a lot in social media because it's air, it's words, and so people are just there's no dialogue, there's no conversation, there's no space to ground all of that energy. So what you see on Nextdoor or Facebook is all this fire, people not feeling that they have power, people feeling scared, people having all of these emotions they're not actually feeling or dealing with. And so it gets projected into these other places and spaces, and it amplifies it to a degree that doesn't, it's like, why this shouldn't be so heightened. So I'm pulling this forward for us so that you can start to notice, hmm, that's distorted. That's distorted. That's distorted. And not to run around like the distorted police, like, you're distorted, you're distorted, you're distorting the field, you're not doing your anger the right way, you're not doing your grief the right way. Don't do that. But to choose not to participate in that, and or choose to be an instrument to elevate it if you can. Sometimes you can't elevate it and you just need to walk away from the field. In other ways, you just need to detonate it and really just ground it, especially if it's rage or anger. You ever find yourself in a place where someone's coming at you with where you can feel distorted anger or rage, like their response to what's happened is not in alignment with the incident that's there. And they kind of get a little crazy or a little nuts, like you could feel the anger and the rage coming at you. This just happened to me a couple days ago, and this person was texting me, and it was just full of hate and judgment and meanness. It was mean, it was bullyish, it was distorted. It was like this person was obviously, this person has that energy in them. We all do. But it was almost like she was another person. And I didn't meet the fire with the fire, even though in texting can do this, right? Email can do it. You don't want to do that. When someone's fire is coming at you, you want to meet it like earth or like water. You want to be still, and you just want to respond from your own place of stillness. And you want to detonate it. You just want to bring it down and ground it. Take a breath. How do you do that? Well, one of the ways you do that, if that's coming at you and they are projecting an amplified level of anger at you, you slow down, you take a breath, and you take a beat before you respond. And one of the first things, and this is a practice, you ask yourself is, what in this is mine? What in this is mine? And what in this is theirs? And if you can separate that out in that moment to see where you might be being triggered at, when I teach this in Fierce Grace, we just got done actually doing the Power series, the first in the Fierce Grace series that I'm teaching right now. Whenever I teach power, we talk about the circle of power that we stand in. So if you imagine yourself standing in a circle of power, and then you're in the center, and you are in your power of fierce grace, when that energy comes at you, sometimes it feels like someone's coming at you and they're going to attack you. Other times it feels like they're putting a fish hook, like they're little fish hooks, and they say something that just triggers something in you. And my teaching is this: don't bite on the fish hook. Don't bite on the fish hook, and don't take that energy on. And you get still, you slow down. You take a beat, you take a breath before you respond. But you can't do that until you've actually had your own reaction first to see, like, oh, this is a fish hook. And am I going to let that get in there? Or am I going to let it lie? So I literally will see it like that person just put a fish hook into my circle of power. Or sometimes it feels like they've shot an arrow at me, with like poison darts at me. And I just, move to the side. And I watch my mind, because my mind wants to grab onto it. Oh, our mind wants to grab onto it. It wants to make the other person wrong. It wants to strategize. It wants to defend. And those tactics usually never work out. They just add more shit and fuel to the fire. Take a breath here with me, because this is real. This is happening all the time. It's happening in families. It's happening in our work environments. It's happening in our, and all kinds of interactions because the world is amplified right now. And so many people, including you and I, have unprocessed wounds that get triggered. And some of it is personal, like it literally is something that is part of your emotional makeup because of the experience you've had on this planet. Some of it is more archetypal, where we are playing out these roles and these plays that humans have been playing out forever that gets us stuck in a spiral and we don't even know that we're become actors in a play. I was talking with one of my leadership coaching clients, and we were talking about how this person that she has to work with he's a man, and we just call him Mr. Machismo, and she is a very strong sovereign woman who has a deep passion for being an advocate, and also clearly like a very strong female woman, and this person just gets under her skin. And, rightfully so, because he's doing all kinds of things that are super manipulative. I'm pretty sure he is on the spectrum. That's the narcissistic spectrum. And he knows that she can see him. She can see behind the facade. So narcissists are amazingly well at throwing a charm around them and making really smart, intelligent people believe they're bullshit. But, like, when you're, like, a wise woman, like, and you can have your eyes open, and especially if you're a strong sovereign woman, you often will see that. So that person will kinda, F with you to try to, discredit you and disempower you. So we're talking about what was getting her so riled up, which sure would be normal reasons for that. But was hooking her and taking her out of her power was she was playing in this what's called an archetypal game. It's like a reindeer game where he's Mr. Machismo and she is the the feminist strong woman, and then there is the third people in the play is all the other people around them. And I'm like, you don't want to play in that game because you're not going to win that game because narcissists are amazing at it. And you don't want to play that game. You don't have to play that game. We just need to get clear on what's triggering you so you could step outside of that and then get the support you need so that other people can actually help that shift. And that's sometimes what you do, when you are in and you find yourself stepping into whether it's something triggering you emotionally because of something that's happened to you in your life, or it reminds you sometimes this is what happened to me a couple days ago, where that person's energy actually was very similar to my mother's energy. I really do not, I don't know should I say this might be kind of strong. I don't have a lot of respect for people who do passive aggressive anger. Not for them, but for that choice. And it's a power play, and it usually comes from people who are disempowered and they feel disempowered in their lives. So they try to assert their power in these other ways that are passive aggressive or, going over your head. And I have compassion for them. My mother was very passive aggressive, at least when I grew up, and she's not sort of that way anymore. She has grown a lot, and at least our relationship has changed. But she was definitely a side swiper and a passive aggressiver growing up. So this person's energy reminded me of that, and that is what got me triggered. And I'm so lucky that I get to live with an amazing man, my partner, Noah Martin, who we just celebrated our 20 years in relationship, and I think our 16th marriage anniversary on October 8th. And he's such a I just feel so grateful for him. I mean, in addition to being an amazing man, he's also trained in lots of different healing techniques. He's just masterful at relationship. Has his master's degree in spiritual psychology, and he's an amazing healer. So I asked for support and asked him to sit down with me so I could feel into what was going on because it was in my field, like when someone gets into your craw or this situation kind of gets stuck in there and you can't seem to let it go. You can't just dampen it down, but you need to get in there and be like, what's going on? It's really hard to do that for yourself. So I just want to acknowledge this for everybody. This is one of the reasons why being in community and having your wisdom council and having people who can help you, just like I help my beloved client to, work through her part. You just can't see what you can't see. So I sat down with him and we took a beat, took a breath, and he asked me to feel into, and he represents this common, this what part is mine, right? And I was like, oh, he's like, there's some energy that's similar to your mother's energy. I'm like, that is true. And so I closed my eyes and I felt, I'm like, where is this present in my body? So you can if you can get into your body and out of your mind, because your mind can't help you in these situations because it wants to defend, it wants to prove, it wants to justify, or just wants, to figure out how to make you safe. And none of those things are going to work. But if you can take a beat, take a breath and slow down and ask, what am I feeling? And where am I feeling it at? And you can write these down. Are you writing these down? You should write these down. I'm not going to put them in the show notes. So make sure you write them down. Okay, what do I feel? What do you feel? And you even just ask yourself, like presence a situation where you might be feeling some anger or rage, and you don't not sure what to do with it. Maybe it is coming out sideways, or you're sideswiping people, or it's making you sick and uneasy and uneaseful. And just even presence it and take a beat here with me and a breath. What's the feeling that you're having about this person or this situation? And where is that feeling in your body? See if you can locate that in your body. For me, when I did this, I felt it in my solar plexus almost immediately, which is where your diaphragm is. It's also the seat of power in your body. And there's a great book by a woman named Anodea Judith, it's about the chakra system. And it's the Eastern Body, Western Mind. It's a great book. If you don't have it, I highly recommend it. She wrote it like 20 years ago, and it goes into detail about all the different energy centers and when we develop them and how they're developed. And Noah just intuitively asked me, he's like, well, when does the solar plexus that become developed? I'm like, I don't know. So he looked it up in the online, like looked at Anodea Judith, age of the solar plexus or whatever, and it was 15 to 21. And 15 is when my father died, and in a car accident. He died suddenly in a car accident. And so what I was responding to in the field, my mother was not a angry person. It wasn't anger, but a lot of sadness. This takes us into this holy grief. There's always a relationship between the sacred rage and holy grief, and grief in general. Why I put the word holy in front of grief is because holy means whole. And in our culture, and I'll come back around to how this relates to the situation. In our culture, we are not taught how to grieve. We're not taught how to discharge anger. So it gets all piled up like plaque on us. And then we spout out and comes out all kinds of crazy ways because we're not taught how to discharge it. We're also not taught how to grieve. And in fact, we're often taught not to grieve. We're taught to just, cement over it. And this interaction with this person whose energy reminded me of my mother, she kind of oozes like she has that energy of a person who is living on the surface and has stuffed down all this stuff and doesn't feel powerful and doesn't feel empowered, and has like underneath that is this grief. And it was definitely there with my mother. Was a great stuffer. She stuffed and stuffed and stuffed and stuffed and stuffed and stuffed. And it would manifest in disease in her body. She had a crazy lung disease that was like this weird thing that you can only get on the farm or something. And lung is connected to grief in Chinese medicine. Those are the two connecting. And my grandmother died of lung cancer. She was already in her 80s, but I know that it was connected to her grief around losing her father or her husband and losing her son. And so when we don't process that grief, when we don't release it, stays in there, it gets lodged in us. And there's our own grief. And then there's the grief, the collective grief, which I'll talk about in the second part of our podcast today when I talk about what goes on with collective rage and collective grief. But for just us right now, Think of how you've been trained and taught and how you've been seen what to do with grief growing up. And how do you release grief? What is your practice for that? Think of the big things that have happened in your life that that when grief happens, in my experience, having um, had it multiple times, my best friend died when I was actually right. Did she die before my father? My father died, my best friend died, my uncle died, like all within a year. And I remember just standing at her casket and just they had to like kick me out because I just couldn't stop crying. It was just like she died after my father. And I think it was the grief from him and the grief from her that just had been stuffed down because in my family of origin, the way that they dealt with grief when people died was just to kind of like almost forget that that person existed. I remember when my father died, my mother never talked about him again, really, and no one talked about it. It was or when my grandfather was dying, no one really talked about it till after he was dead. It was just weird. They just stuffed it down and don't talk about it, which is so crazy, and which is why, but we do this as a culture. But what I learned about grief after that, when I learned how to be with grief, is that grief is this opening for us if we let ourselves take the space. And when I really learned about this was when my relationship ended after 15 years, and I let myself have the space to grieve that and all of the parts. And I used it as a way to like excavate and go into my heart and get all of the stuff that was in there that was that deep grief, some stuff stuck in there from my father's death, from just things I had needed to grieve. And it took me like 2 years. I had a therapist, I had an intuitive spiritual healer I was working with. I had a body worker, and I was really involved in my own healing and working and all of it at the same time. But I was excavating. And that was the first time I had really done that, which is why it took 2 years. Now, fast forward when my beloved dog, Nanook, she's not really a dog. She was my soul familiar. She was a dog, but she was this beautiful Siberian Husky. People like literally would stop their cars and be like, "Oh my God, your dog is so beautiful." I'm like, "Yeah, well, that's because she's special. She's a special being." And she was the first being that I really felt like I received unconditional love from. And because it was safe. Dogs are like that. Cats are safe. That's whether we could become so connected to them. And when she was 17 and a half, and basically our deal with each other was I said, "Look, when she's ready to go, you need to tell me you're ready to go." And I remember the day because I had been teaching a retreat. I came home and my whole house smelled like death, and I could not clean the death out of the house. And I looked at her, and she just looked at me, and she's like, "I need you to let me go. This body is old. I can't be here anymore." So I cleared up my whole schedule, and I spent 3 days, just her and me. And I had been preparing for that. And this is the thing about grief. Once you learn like how to work with it, I was already grieving for her before she died. I was having, I'd have these grief waves because grief happens like that. It's like water, whoosh. And so by the time it was time for her to go, I was way more prepared. And in that ending, it was like that there's that hole, that happens in our hearts. And I made a commitment to myself that I was going to fill it in with love. And that doesn't mean that we're not sad. It means we have our sadness. It means we let ourselves be in the process, but without going under. We need our buoys. When we're in grief, which is such a great time to excavate and go in there, we need support. We need the floaties with us so we don't sink. So having people that we can work with, like I had my team of people that were with me, and when Nanook passed, I had my circles and my sisters, and they were supporting me through this, so I didn't sink. And also when we're in that holy grief, because this is what makes it about wholeness. You're like, I'm going in there and I'm going to excavate the stuff that I haven't been able to touch so that it doesn't just cement itself over. And then I have to freaking, it was going to stuff it down. And then it's going to become disease in my body or my mind, or I'm never really going to heal and I'll never be able to be in that wholeness. And it doesn't always have to be something like like death. It can just be grieving, like I'm leaving this island. I'm leaving the West Coast. I'm leaving and finishing a whole book of my life. It feels like that's been the last almost 18 years. And I'm completing a book. And so there has as I've been emptying my house and I've been releasing stuff, I've had these waves of grief and I just keep coming back to holy grief. And it's just like whether I'm like it was just looking at some dishes and coffee mugs and thinking of all the people I've had retreats with and who have been here and I've, met on the West Coast, and I'm just remembering different people and just grieving some of those pieces, and not like I had to cry for 7 days about it, but it was like letting it move through me. And so when we feel that, it is a stop, pause, take a beat. What am I feeling? What of this is mine? And then what do you need? That's the other question you want to ask. What do I need? What do I need? This is the reason I didn't do this podcast 2 weeks ago. And because I just didn't have it. I didn't have it to give. 2 weeks ago, I was having a holy grief moment and I was just in it on that Sunday. And I wanted to do this first because, we can't be our best selves, our best leaders, our most radiant, all those things if we're being drugged down by this unprocessed, unreleased grief and or this anger and rage that comes out sideways and then creates more harm and hurt in the field because we're acting from our wound. And so you and I can't control everybody out there. I can't control this person who projected onto me. I could just clean up what was going on within me, get the support I needed to do that. And then really I do have compassion because I understand, um and had had grew up around people who stuffed things down and felt so disempowered that they had to assert their power. They felt like they did in a way that was not sacred. That doesn't mean I'm going to stand down and be a doormat, but I don't need to fight it. And that's a whole other podcast for us to talk about. But I wanted to presence that for us. Here's the other thing I want to say before we go to the practices is that why I ask you this question, what's mine? It's a really important question to ask yourself because the field, meaning the world, is really amplified right now. And you can pick up other people's emotions and other people's anger and other people's grief. You could even step into what's called the collective grief or the collective rage. And all of a sudden, it's like you've plugged in your light bulb and your being to this, like you're 100 watts and you've just plugged into 1,000,000 watts, and it's amplifying and distorting your emotions. And so you need to ask that question, what's mine in this? That way you don't take on everybody else's. And after I share these two practices, we're going to talk about the collective grief and the collective rage. So let's talk about practices first for discharging. Okay. So I love the word discharge. Very good word, discharge. Actually, I was keep saying actually today, which is so weird. Sorry, I just noticed I keep saying it over and over and over again. It's one of those things I used to do a lot when I was first doing television for my books and stuff. And my publicist, I remember her saying, "Christine, you say actually a lot." And I think I say it when I get a little nervous. And this is we could spend a whole weekend together. We could spend a lifetime together talking about this. And I'm probably going to get you here for another 20 minutes. And maybe it's not that I'm nervous. Maybe it's first I just need to slow down a little. Um, it's it's just so essential that we change how we relate to rage and grief. I don't think we can create a healthy society, family, world, self if we don't. And so if you're here listening to this, actually you're not listening, if we're here having this conversation, this is what we do at Feminine Power Time. You're not here to listen to me. I hope you don't come just to listen to me. I hope you come feeling like we're having a conversation together and we're exploring together. If you're here, you get that. You know, I have the candle I lit for us is sitting on a little token that says, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." And I lit that candle and put it on that token because that is a life directive. So you know, right? We have that power. It starts with us. That is where systemic change and activism starts, is with us and in the interactions we have every day. Then that can affect things generationally and socially. We have a lot of people who are trying to do good in the world, but they're responding and reacting from their wound versus their wholeness because it's frankly easier than having to stop and, look inside and feel. But we can't heal if we don't feel. So that's why this matters, so that this can change, not just for us, but for 7 generations forward. That is one of the most beautiful wisdom teachings that comes from the indigenous wisdom teachings of, what we're doing now affects 7 generations. And it's something I'm just even noticing as I'm getting rid of stuff that I, don't want to take with me. Noah and I are super committed to not putting things into the landfill because I have holy grief often over what has goes on with this planet, which is part of also what got triggered in the last couple of days is just the disregard for the earth and the planet and people just like caring more about their own comfort and their own, and I mean comfort, I don't mean basic needs. I mean like, I don't like that. That's not the way I want it. And it's this entitlement thing where we think we can just impose our will onto nature and not have any care for what is good for the trees or the water or the plants. And that pisses me off, to be honest. And I feel like I am a steward for this earth. And so knowing that can get us triggered. Sorry, I just went into the trigger. Coming back over here. Still a little fresh for me. That 7 generations, what I'm noticing is like with the stuff, like I have stuff I purchased 7 years ago, like little plastic bottles to put makeup in when you travel, and it's not recyclable. I don't know what to do with it. Noah and I are walking around the house, I'm like, I don't know what to do with it. What should we do with it? And like all our pill bottles, I'm like, what do I do with these? Just from our supplements or whatever, and just noticing how the choices I made in the past are creating karma in the now. So now what I can do is I can be more conscious, even more conscious about what I'm buying. But the same thing is true for how we are right now on the planet. Is like 7 generations. Like if you and I can embrace sacred rage and holy grief and actually do it in our lives, then it creates wholeness. Literally by you just living your life and the choices you're making and the way you use your voice. That's powerful. Every human did that. If even just 10% of humans did that, vibrational on the planet would shift like that. So don't dismiss the power you have through your choices and your voice. And that means you do need practices to discharge the anger. I love the word discharge. I was talking to my friend Shiloh about this a couple weeks ago when I was definitely having anger was coming out sideways, and I was doing one of my practices. So when I notice I have a buildup of anger, which to me kind of feels a little bit like plaque on your teeth, it's a buildup, right? And it's built up. So I have practices I do that are like preventative maintenance care. One of them is yoga. So Kundalini yoga especially is really good for this. It's not just about, I need to be zen and be peaceful. I mean, you get to that place. It's like, move this shit out of my body. So we use breath work and we use our hands a lot, and we're, moving the stuff literally out of our fabric and our fascia and our belly, where all these stuff gets stuck, and they're different kriyas, different practices to do that. There literally is a kriya, which is basically a set of asanas or a set of postures that's about releasing anger. And so I have done that on occasion where I'll do it, for a month, or I'll do it for a week when I just know I'm in a time where it's kind of coming up. Also, I do like a daily breath work, and I do breath of fire every day. So I'm moving that out. And I have Sakriya is another practice I do that's Kundalini yoga based. That is about clearing out the subconscious. Yogis say if you're not clearing out your subconscious, it's basically, it will start to stink, just like if you don't take a shower. So there are like these smaller things that we can do, kind of like brushing your teeth, right? You brush your teeth so you don't get a lot of plaque buildup. But sometimes, you don't get into those little crevices and stuff. That's where the buildup gets in there. That's when you need to like have a discharge so that you don't discharge on somebody else. Mhm. So I love the word discharge. So Charlotte and I were talking, and her partner was in the armed forces, and he had said to her, when you come out after this, this very challenging and traumatic experience where people die, they don't teach you how to discharge those emotions. It's getting better, but nowhere near where it needs to be. We don't have any way to discharge it. And so it comes out all kinds of sideways and crazy, or people, become addicts, or, because they're just trying to deal with it and dampen it down. They don't know how to move these feelings. But just even think of that, like, the ages of 15 to 21. If that's when your solar plexus and your center of power and self is developing, you need a way to discharge those emotions, right? Then discharge that anger and the and so that's probably why I liked heavy metal music at that time, and I liked fast cars. And I had a green Cutlass 1973 with a white racing stripe and emerald green. So cool. Excited to get another emerald green car, but this time I think I'm going to get a Jeep. Okay, sorry, sidetracked. But like just thinking about that, right? Of like, what are you doing on a kind of a maintenance level, like brushing your teeth to discharge, moving my hand around, discharge the anger and the rage, and so it doesn't get built up. Some people run, some people bike, it's like you got to move that energy, but meditation is also good. But you can't start with the meditation. You got to move it through so that you can touch that place of stillness. Because remember, anger is fire. So what anger needs is to touch that water or that groundedness. Earthing is another great practice. I'm going to share two other practices with you that are great dischargers. These are the ones I do when I have the plaque, and I'm like, all of a sudden I realize, oh my God, I've just sideswiped Noah, and I could feel the angers oozing off of me, and I need to do a discharge. So one is called Osho. So some of you may know who Osho is. He is a yogic teacher, and he is no longer on the planet, but he has something called the Osho Dynamic Meditation. And you should definitely look it up. I will put that into the show notes. And it's an hour-long meditation. It's not like you meditate and you're sitting there just breathing. It's actually a very active one that has 5 different parts to it. That includes moving around, it includes breathing, it includes 15 minutes of like letting yourself just be crazy and do whatever is going to happen, to 15 minutes of just being absolutely still, to 15 minutes of dancing and joy. So it has, for those of you who are familiar with the 5 rhythms, it has, a similar but different arc to that. And I've done this on retreats with people. I've done it myself. I've done it with a friend and I have done it probably about 5 times in my life. I think I would benefit from doing it every year. But every time I do it, it just moves the stuff out. So check that out is number 1. Another practice for discharging, and comes from the sacred feminine tradition, is to go out to nature and to find a tree that's dead and ask it if you can basically unleash your anger and rage and or grief onto it. And you can get a stick and you kind of just start, or you can use your foot, but a stick is really good. And you start hitting this dead tree with this branch or kicking it. And you try to access either grief or rage. So for some of us, like me, rage is easier. For my, I've done this multiple times and held space for dear friends or clients. One of my friends grief is where she goes. So she can go way more to Eeyore, and I'm more like, rah, I go that way. And so when I did it, so people who have fire start with anger. And on the other side of that anger and rage is grief. When you break through, you will sob. For those of you who are grief is where you tend to go, you might need somebody's help to get to the place of anger. Or if you can use music or something like that. My friend really struggled with it. She was like, she was releasing the anger around her divorce and her ex-husband. And she was just like, Ma, she was kind of being mamby-pamby about it. She just couldn't access the anger. So I showed her how. Give me that stick, and I started showing her how to access that anger. So I was advocating for her so that she could feel it. And then she was able to get into it herself. So for those of you that have a challenge with that anger, bringing somebody with you, asking them to come and hold space, and maybe who has more access to that anger can also be really helpful. Or music that kind of has that fiery drum. Like sometimes I'll listen to like the Japanese drummers are called, I think they're the Kodo drummers, like something that has like a really strong beat that can also help you. Another way to do this of a discharge, and I'll share this example, and then we'll end with the collective grief. This is especially good if it's grief that you're releasing, starting with the grief, and on the other side usually is anger. And to get yourself near water, because again, water is connected to grief, but it's also connected to the mother and the feminine. Remember, think the womb, right? So you could put yourself into a bath, do what we call great mother baths, and you put some salt in there, some candles, with the intention of accessing and releasing grief. My favorite track to listen to when I do this is Jennifer Beerson, her album Returning. I'll put this link in there too. It is, you have to get it from her website, and it's Berezan. It's an hour long, and it is just 100% great mother energy. And the reason it's so powerful to do it with this is because you feel held. And when we have this holy grief, and this is going to take us right into the collective grief, we feel for the planet. We feel for the people. It's part of what makes us amazing and compassionate. And especially I see this in my highly intuitive women clients, or just and we can feel the pain of the world. Now the thing is, that pain is too much for you to channel, and it is way too much for you to hold. And you're not supposed to hold the grief of the world, or you're not supposed to hold the grief of all the dying trees and all of the dying whales and all of the wolves who are being massacred. You're supposed to tap into it, see it, but don't jump into it. But sometimes we do. Sometimes it really just is there, or it's our own grief, or it's, generational grief that we have in our family line. So if you can get yourself to water like a bathtub, or I'm looking out right now at the Puget Sound, and there are these beautiful rocks. And I remember 2 years ago, I came home from a trip to the Bay Area, and I was affected by two things that were happening. One, I had learned that there was a story in the newspaper about young girls in Marin County at the age of 13, 14, 15, and this doctor who was removing their breasts because they said they didn't want to be girls. And their mothers were sanctioning and saying, yes, go ahead, you can cut your breasts off between the ages of 13 and 16, because you said you don't want to be a girl. And there's so much more we could talk about that, but I'm not going to go into all of my thoughts about that. But it just struck me, like the grief for the mothers who felt like they had to do that, the grief for the girls who, again, 15 to 21, you're figuring out who you are. You want to assert your power, not the time to be cutting off necessarily body parts at that time. And what's that going to do to your hormonally? And you might change your mind. And then a doctor, like, how can we live in a country that is augmenting these girls, whether it's putting new boobs in or taking the boobs out, and just what that means about the feminine. It's just like, And then I also found out that people were had said one of my greatest fears is people are going to start putting chips into their bodies. We're not just going to have Apple iWatches. We're going to just start putting chips. And then we're going to be like these people who are part human, part machine. And I learned that was happening. And I was like, oh my God, what is going to happen to this world? And it just hit me like one of those like heavy met balls you used to at the gym, that you throw those weight balls, like a weight ball of holy grief. And I felt like I was off, like I couldn't really think, I couldn't concentrate. I felt just heavy. And I'm like, oh, this is holy grief. So I took myself down to the sound and I splayed out in a full surrender position. And I just sobbed. I sobbed for the girls of this world. I sobbed for the mothers of this world. I sobbed for the feminine. I sobbed for all the ways in which women's bodies had been mutilated. And I don't know how long I was down there for. But on the other side, when you do this discharging in a way that is without violence and creates respect and it moves it out of you, you will come to the stillness. And in that moment, you listen and you ask your inner wisdom, what's my part to do? What's my part to do here? How can I respond in a way that's going to bring more beauty? Not beauty like in the, beauty L'Oreal kind of way. Not that there's anything below L'Oreal, but you know what I mean. I mean, true beauty, harmony, love, grace. What's my part to do here? Show me. So my response to that was the beginning of me getting really clear about focusing my self-love work and the work I do around intuition and the inner mean girl and feminine wisdom and teaching young women in high school, in college, in their early 20s, what and how to stay connected to their intuition and their inner knowing and how to navigate their emotions. And because we don't teach that yet. And that was my response. When recently Texas created that crazy thing where not only was it taking away women's body sovereignty around whether and how they can choose to keep a pregnancy or terminate a pregnancy, they were now going to put a $10,000 award on people they would pay people to narc out on other people. And that enraged me. I mean, the body sovereignty was big enough, but then when it was like, are you kidding me? We're going to create a society in which people are getting paid to narc on other people. That cannot happen. That cannot happen. And it also tapped into the grief. So there was just the grief, like, oh my God, like, how could this be? How could anyone look at that and be like, that is a good idea? Like, that's draconian as the best word I saw, just like that's going to create a bad culture and a bad deal. So I reached out to a friend who lives in Texas. That was just to get myself settled. And then I'm like, okay, once I got on the other side of all that, what's my response? Well, my response is to create the Elevate Feminine Leadership Councils and start bringing women together in other ways, gather the conscious women. That's my job. The people who are here to reimagine and redesign and be a place for them to come, whether it's Feminine Wisdom Way or it's whatever the communities are, or the Feminine Wisdom Cafe. Like, that's what I'm doing. I'm gathering the conscious women because I know if conscious women are in community and in connection, we are stronger and we will each do our part. And I also decided to write a story. I haven't started yet, but it's a story about how we make decisions from the perspective of counsel and what a society that creates from counsel and has all voices heard, how that opens up new possibility. But one of the women in one of my councils, she, an amazing artist named Sharon Zeigen, who is also, a lot of the art that all the art actually that we show in the feminine leadership work is Sharon's, and she lives in Austin. And her response, I don't know if she's a co-founder, but she's been part of a thing called Resist Dance. So her and her husband is actually in it, and other people. When the marches happened in Texas, they go to these places where people are gathering and rallying and doing things, and they bring the music. And they take all that energy that could be like really explosive, and they use the music and dance, resist dance, to move the energy and bring like joy to it. Like, not like, oh, everything is nice and oh, like little smiley faces, but pure like joy and heart and humanity, like bring the heart. That's what they do. And they give people a way to channel that energy. That's her part. And she sent the council and all of us pictures from it, which was so great because that's not my part. So I could see her doing that part. And because I saw her doing her part, it made it okay for me to do my part. And so just get clear and kind of feel into what your part is. And that's just going to end us here too. Remember what I've kind of the practice is: slow down, take a beat, feel, respond as a way to create wholeness. Respond from the wholeness, not the wound. And so with that, dear one, I send you off with much love. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for having the courage to do things differently and to really live in a conscious way. And if this spoke to you at all, or you know someone in your life that this would speak to, share it with them. One of the ways that we work in the feminine is we grow and we make a difference together. And so just go ahead. You could think right from your podcast app, you just press share and send it over. That would be great. And if you're inspired to leave a rating or a review on iTunes, it's also really super helpful. So thank you so much for all of you that have already done that. And just thank you to everyone for being here. I'm so excited to be on this journey with you. Taking a deep exhale. I'll see you next week. Much love.
Okay, wise beings, how are we all feeling? Are you tapped into some emotions that you may not have realized were stuck in there? Let's all pause for a moment together and just take 3 deep breaths. First, exhale it all out. Now, inhale deeply. Exhale completely. Again, inhale slowly. Exhale gently. One more time. Inhale. Exhale. Congratulations. You all just took a breath and took a beat. And now I invite you to continue this slow, deep breathing and close your eyes if you're able. And if you're not able to close your eyes, you can simply soften your focus as much as is appropriate. And now visualize a pathway connecting your mind and your heart. And just go ahead and allow your attention to drop from your mind down that pathway into your heart. Take a deep breath in and feel your heart expanding. And from this space of expansion, of presence in the heart, simply contemplate the inquiry. What anger or grief am I holding on to? What anger or grief am I holding on to? And allow whatever comes up to come up without judging it or analyzing it. And if nothing comes, just allow yourself to be in the inquiry, in the mystery, breathing slowly and deeply now. Now, if you received a response from your heart wisdom, then feel in a little deeper. Feel into where in my body do I feel this anger or grief? Again, just allow yourself to sense into this. Allow your body wisdom to speak. The response is not going to be found in your mind. Take a few more deep breaths, just allowing your being to breathe into these inquiries and receive. Now, coming back to the present moment, open your eyes slowly if they were closed. Bring your focus back to the room that you're in, the body that you're in. And if you received any wisdom during this short but mighty meditation, I invite you to jot it down. And if you didn't, everything's okay. You are perfectly in the right place, and simply opening up to receive is the right step for you right now. And so that's the inquiry for this week. It's a two-part inquiry. What anger or grief am I holding on to? And where do I feel it in my body? So we invite you to play with this inquiry over the coming week. And you're also invited to come on over to the Feminine Wisdom Cafe and share the wisdom that you're receiving. The Feminine Wisdom Cafe is a free online community. It's hosted on Mighty Networks, and Christine and I are also available to connect there. We love hearing from you, and we love witnessing the wisdom that you share. So we'll put a link to the cafe in the show notes so that you can find it. Come on over and share. I also invite you to take a look at the practices that Christine shared today. We'll include a list in the show notes of that as well. And one of the best ways to start playing with the inquiries and the practice is in community and connection. So I invite you to share this episode with a friend and together conversate on the inquiry and choose one practice to play with. And then join us next week for the next episode in the Season of Light, where we'll be conversating on how to stay sane in an insane world. Looking forward to being with you again. Sending you all off with much love.